Hi, I'm Marty Nemko. Here are my favorite short stories and 3 poems from my fiction work. And they come from 2 books. One is Modern Fables. The other is Soloists, subtitled Short Stories of Introverts and Outsiders Facing a Dilemma. And from my book, Poems Practical. First one is Turning Down Harvard. At age 6, my parents bought me a Harvard t-shirt. At 10, they took me on a tour there. What I mainly remember from that was the triple scoop ice cream cone that they wouldn't let me have. In high school, my parents advised me, every Ivy has a crew team, and few kids are willing to get up early in the morning to row. I managed to dissuade them. Would you get up every morning at 5 to freeze your ass off? But I took as many advanced placement courses as were offered, even though that sacrificed extracurriculars and teenagers', less formal pleasures. I took the SAT 3 times. One of my friends even took up the tuba, explaining, my college counselor told me that even Harvard's marching band struggles to find tuba players. In April of my senior year, I got the email from Harvard. Your notification is at your portal. For 2 days, I couldn't make myself look at it. Finally, I read, we are delighted to, and the message's last sentence, we invite you to campus on April 24th for Discovery Day, where you'll meet your fellow admits, tour campus, visit classes, and enjoy a celebratory dinner on us. At Discovery Day, all proceeded as I expected, except for the classes. I thought, useless shit, taught badly. And those teachers are no doubt among Harvard's best. After all, they're trying to get us to come here rather than to Yale or whatever. This is what I worked so hard for? This is what my parents are going to spend $300,000 on? The dinner was a buffet, with bar-height tables to encourage meeting and greeting. I told a number of students what I was feeling, for example. Even though Harvard's piece of paper is a big deal, it's crazy for smart people to spend yet more time at a student desk taught esoterica and boringly. Schooled in the art of politeness, the students listened respectfully, and one even paraphrased me. So, you're wondering whether Harvard is the right choice for you? My typical response, if Harvard, education's pinnacle, is like this, I'm wondering whether any college is the best use of our time. Each student took the first opportunity to escape to talk with people who'd cause less cognitive dissonance. When I returned home, my parents spurred, so, how'd you like the mighty Crimson? I muttered fine, and walked out. And I walked, until I had an idea. I was going to start a charter high school. Instead of a curriculum larded with what students didn't care about, my school's curriculum would emphasize relationships, money, choosing a career, plus what individual students wanted to learn. There would be virtual mornings at which the students at home would complete self-paced simulation and video-rich modules taught online by transformational teachers from all over the world. In the afternoon, the students would come to a local community center for extracurriculars. I submitted my charter school application to the school district, which didn't respond for a month, and when it did, it imposed 2 pages of requirements that were impossible to meet. When I told my parents, they resumed the pressure. Just try Harvard. Otherwise, what are you going to do, work at McDonald's? I'm not sure what I'm going to do. In any case, that story is called Turning Down Harvard. The next story is called Sam's Last Concert. In the wings, Sam could hear the concertmaster tuning up the orchestra. Damn, my hand is shaking more than usual. It's a bad Parkinson's day. Plus, it's my last concert. I'm nervous. I am glad I decided on the Grieg piano concerto, but with these hands, nothing is easy. Sam had been a concert pianist his whole life. At age 11, he finished fourth in the Midwest Regional Young Artists Competition, and now, at age 83, he had performed 45 concerts, including one with the Kansas City Symphony. He thought, true, that was just in the KC Symphony's summer festival when lots of the A players were on vacation, but still. Somehow I wish my ex-wife were here. How could she have dumped me? I still wish she were here tonight. Do I play it safe? If I make a lot of note mistakes, it would make the audience think that I stayed too long at it, like those star baseball players who'd rather hit 200 than retire. Or do I go for a home run, a chance at a write-up in the Kansas City Star? Roseman finishes with a flourish. The conductor gave Sam a forced smile, and Sam strode on stage. This is it. Deep breaths, deep breaths. Damn, my hands are shaking more. I'm taking too long. I gotta get out there. Gotta get there, stand up straight, old men hunch, stride, don't shuffle. But Sam could manage only to shuffle on stage. He hung onto the piano with one hand as he bowed his head to the audience. If I tried to bow from the waist, I could fall. And he sat down at the piano. I've had this moment so many times, but this is different. Sam used his old trick of adjusting the seat up and then back down again, not because it needed adjusting, but to buy a little more time to ground himself before the moment of truth. And Sam began, and took every reasonable risk he could, and most of the time he won. Yes, his boldness caused a few note mistakes, but only the ignorant or mean-spirited could criticize his exciting performance. It was inspiring at any age, but for an 83-year-old with advanced Parkinson's, it gives me the chills just to tell you about it. And yes, Sam got not just the usual obligatory extended applause, bestowed as much to protest classical music's dying popularity as to acknowledge the performer, but fervent applause, and then, yes, a standing ovation. Not a charity ovation, a heartfelt one. And Sam, who usually was too shy to look at the applauding audience and so would stare at the back wall, soaked in the smiling, standing people. Then he sighed and plodded off stage for what he thought was the last time. Sam shuffled into his dressing room, closed the door, and dropped into a chair. I survived. I didn't embarrass myself, but I can't go to the reception. That's like a retirement party where everyone tries to make light of it being the beginning of the end. My end. And then there was a knock on the door. Daddy! His daughter opened the door and gushed, You were amazing. You were really amazing. Come on, they're all waiting for you. Sam knew there was no avoiding it, so he trudged downstairs. When he arrived, the chatter morphed. The chatter morphed into applause. He thought, no one likes long speeches and nothing ungracious. I should be a good boy. But he couldn't resist saying what he really felt. Honestly, I can't stand the thought that this will be my last performance. And he teared up. Then a 4-year-old toddled up to him. Do you want to play in my class? And Sam Roseman went on to play more concerts than he had in his entire life, in preschools and elementary schools, first just locally, then around the country. He never got paid. Indeed, had to pay his travel expenses, but didn't begrudge it. I can't think of a better way to spend my money than to teach young kids to love classical music, and that old people aren't necessarily irrelevant. Anyway, that story is called Sam's Last Concert. This one is called Should I Kill Him? On the desert island, parrots, macaws, and toucans chirped. The peace was broken by a shriek, so I wandered into the jungle toward it, and there, snickering as he strutted away, wielding a bloody machete, was one of the island's few inhabitants. There probably are fewer than 10 inhabitants, yet I'd never seen him before. I edged closer to see a toucan lying on the ground, its foot chopped off and suffering. Quietly, I followed the man, and he slaughtered another bird that had stopped to rest. He swaggered on, stopped along a stream, and chopped a frog in half. I was too scared to confront him, but had to keep following him. He strode along the stream, and when it widened into a river, a boy was bending over, fixing a leak in his canoe. The man crept toward the boy, machete raised. What should I do? I also had a machete, although I had never used it on anything but thatch. And the last thing I thought I'd ever do was use it to hurt a person. But the man would probably try to maim or even kill the boy. Or maybe he wouldn't. Or maybe I could reason with him. Or should I fight it out with him? Or am I too likely to get killed and then both the boy and I would suffer? I thought of all the people that could have killed Hitler, or Stalin, or Putin. For example, their close-by lieutenants. One shot to the head and millions of people would have been saved from suffering and death. On the other hand, it feels cosmically wrong to kill. So, like those lieutenants, paralyzed by indecisiveness and fear, I just stood there. So that story is called Should I Kill Him? The next story is called Tits Tommy. Tommy was always disliked because he was a know-it-all. He couldn't help it. He was smart and not restrained enough to hide it, so the kids hated him. He tried to compensate by being ever so nice. He was so careful to not hurt anyone's feelings. He did all sorts of favors for kids, even though they were rarely reciprocated. Indeed, the nicer he was, the more kids took him for a patsy. They felt fine about ignoring Tommy, asking him for more favors and treating him insensitively, even cruelly. For example, as a preteen, he got chubby, and the kids called him Tits Tommy. He responded as his parents taught him, "Turn the other cheek." Alas, that was seen as a sign of weakness, so the taunts grew into his getting beaten up, often for some mock offense. "Why are you looking at my girlfriend?" In high school, Tommy decided that the way to attract girls was to be really polite, tactful, buying them little presents, fully respectful of their sexual reticence. The popular girls saw that as unattractive. The only girl who liked him was Rita, who, because she was very unattractive, was starving for kindness. Despite Tommy seeing again and again that being nicer than average results in less respect, he went through life being Mr. Nice Guy, clinging to the belief that it's worth the opprobrium in exchange for doing what's cosmically right. Alas, even his wife and sons took advantage of him. The nicer he was, the more indifferent, indeed antipathic they were to him. He tried hard to please them, but they, increasingly, with ever greater confidence, acted as though his wants were irrelevant. So as Tommy aged, he grew ever more dispirited. "I just don't fit on this earth." Alas, unlike in the movies, he never met anyone who treasured him for his kindness, not since Rita. Nor was he rewarded by his employers or society. Tommy was nice even to the nurses who injected him with chemotherapy, and then the euthanasia drug. Perhaps the only time he showed strength was in his will. He left most of his assets to charity. And that story is called Tits Tommy. The next story is called Affirmative Actions. March 15th, 2017. Kevin was diagnosed with incipient sociopathy. September 13th, 2019. Kevin wasn't selected as president of his high school's math club. Furious, he knocked over his desk. At home, he drew a caricature of the winner, splattered it with red paint, and hid it in his journal, which he hid inside a slit in his box spring. March 15th, 2023. Despite a 4.0 and having been published 3 times in the American Journal of Bioweaponry, as an undergraduate, which was a record, Kevin wasn't chosen to speak at graduation. He chose not to attend the ceremony. Rather, in the middle of the night, on the Live and Excel sign at the Molecular Biology Building's entrance, with blood red spray paint, he covered the V in the word live, so the sign read Lie and Excel. May 21st, 2035, 4:00 p.m. The chair of the bioweapons department told Kevin that the year's tenure slot went to someone else. Kevin exploded, insisting, "I am infinitely more qualified." Evenly, the chair said, "As you know, Kevin, unfortunately, it's up or out. That is, you get tenure. If you're up for tenure, if you don't get it, you need to leave. You can stay until the end of June." 4:01 p.m. Kevin removed the most virulent and airborne communicable bioweapon from his lab's freezer, put it into the irradiator to create mutated versions, and inoculated 200 mice, 50 each with one of the 4 mutations that, under electron microscopy and flow cytometry, seemed most likely to be lethal. May 22nd, the next day. Incubation period. May 23rd. He cultured the mutation that killed the most mice, 48 of 50. Then, using machine learning gene editing software, he altered that virus to maximize its airborne transmissibility. He filled 3 tiny vials with it, enough to infect and later kill hundreds of people, who in turn would affect thousands, who then would infect millions, who would in turn kill billions. He cut open the seam of his wallet's inner lining and sealed it with glue that allowed the seam to be easily opened. He drove to the furthest parking lot in John F. Kennedy International Airport. He got on the shuttle bus wearing an N95 mask that inside had a second, even more protective filter, opened his wallet, and surreptitiously opened 1 vial. By the time the bus arrived at the international terminal, the bus full of people headed all over the globe, having had breathed a fatal dose with its 1-day incubation period, left and got on their planes. Kevin bought a ticket to Beijing, which stopped in L.A. He duplicated that process at LAX and then again at Beijing Airport. May 24th. In his hotel room in Beijing, Kevin took pleasure in watching President Chelsea Clinton on TV urging calm. That story is called Affirmative Actions. The next story is called Average Jane. In school, teachers focused on the brilliant and on the slow, so Average Jane was pretty much ignored. Jane's classmates liked the good-looking kids and made fun of the ugly ones. They barely noticed Average Jane. At her 50th high school reunion, most people didn't even remember her. In college, while Jane wanted to date, she felt uncomfortable trying to stand out, being perky, dressing sexily, and so on. So she was pretty much ignored. When Jane applied for jobs, her resume didn't stand out. So the best she could get was rent-a-car reservationist, where she chatted little with customers or coworkers. Jane was forgettable. She joined a hiking group, but even when she approached people, the conversation quickly petered out and they'd move on. Jane did have some modest romantic relationships, but sooner than later, the guy would end it. When Jane asked for an explanation, they said things like, "There's nothing wrong with you, there's just not quite the spark." Jane thought that maybe she could be special if she worked with disabled people, so she volunteered at a group home for people with intellectual disabilities. But she had difficulty helping them and got little recognition for her efforts, so after a few Saturdays, apologizing, she quit. Next, she tried volunteering at an animal shelter. She and the doggies loved each other, but that didn't feel enough. At the end of her 50th high school reunion, Jane trudged back to her car, gently closed its door, and cried. Would she die unexceptional, unrecognized? She sat, trying to concoct a basis for hope. She considered dolling herself up, puffing herself up, bubbling herself up, but in the end decided that the wisest course was self-acceptance. Jane spent her last decade reading, journaling, gardening, painting, petting dogs at the shelter, and volunteering at a suicide hotline. A go-getter might have done more to improve her lot, but average Jane had just average drive. By definition, half of people have done worse. That story is called Average Jane. The next story is called Norma. Norma graduated from Leviathan University with a major in psychology and $132,000 in student debt. Ironically, she took a job in Leviathan's bursar's office as an accounts receivable clerk. Her job was to send notices to students who were late in paying their student loans and to respond to in-person pleas for forbearance. It pained Norma to see the endless line of graduates and dropouts who couldn't afford to pay. She thought back to when she was in high school and had been seduced by Leviathan's marketing materials that implied that its graduates are likely to get a well-paying job. And those brochures explicitly blared that misleading statistic, college graduates earn $1 million more. But Norma had to put such thoughts aside. Her job was to get the alumni and the dropouts to pay. So she told student after student, "I'm sorry." And she emailed letter after letter. "Your account is past due. To avoid additional penalties, please remit the balance due within 10 days. But there was a last straw. An alum begged, "I want a job where I can make a difference, but I'm saddled with all this debt, so I had to take a job as an insurance salesman, but I'm not cut out for that. I'm cut out for helping people. I'm living with 3 roommates and still can't afford both my rent and to pay back my student loan." On impulse, Norma simply zeroed out the student's account and said, "Your loan is now paid in full. Go make a difference." The student sputtered, but, Norma waved her away. "Just go." Within an hour, her boss came in and said, "Zeus, the computer program, just kicked out a file. Yesterday, that person had a balance of $107,955, and today it's zero?" Norma lied. "I have no idea. It must be a computer glitch." That bought Norma a little time, but she knew that even if she claimed it was a typing error she made, she'd be out of a job within a day or even go to jail. So she decided to do as much Robin Hooding as she could in her remaining time. The next person in line was a guy who came to Leviathan on a football scholarship, but after a year was told that there now were better players and he lost his scholarship. He told Norma, "If Leviathan hadn't given me the scholarship, I would have gone to an inexpensive community college. But now I have a year's worth of credits that may not all transfer, and I made friends here at Leviathan, so I feel stuck. Is there any way you can spread out the payments?" Norma lied again. "I just found a technicality that forgives ex-scholarship athletes tuition for 4 years. Congratulations." At that moment, Norma's boss, who had been hiding within earshot, burst in along with a cop. "Norma, I can't believe you stole from the university." She retorted, "Every day the university steals from its students, selling a defective, exorbitant product. I just established a return policy." Nevertheless, the cop handcuffed Norma and took her away. Norma never felt prouder. That story is called Norma. Next story is called, well... The CEO was still in his office when Carmen, the cleaner, came in. Flustered, she said, "Lo siento. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I came in when you're still working, Mr. Lee." Without lifting his head, Mr. Lee muttered, "No problem." Quietly, Carmen swept the non-existent dirt from the floor and dusted the non-existent dust from the bookcases. "Perdóname, Mr. Lee. May I ask you a question?" He sighed, and she continued, You are a good man. You always talk about diversity. Even I got to be on the DEI committee you set up." He looked up, said thank you, and turned back to his computer screen. But Carmen wasn't through. "Mr. Lee, I'm sorry, but for my family I need to ask you a question." I have wanted to ask you for a long time and hoped that one day I'd see you when you were working late. You see, I work graveyard. What is it? I have 3 children and no husband, and we have to live in a house with another family. It's too small. I heard that your house is 24 rooms and you live there with only your wife and servants. Could I rent a room in your house? Mr. Lee stopped working. Well, Carmen, I just can't do that. Carmen hesitated, said, "Thank you, Mr. Lee," and embarrassed, grabbed her cart and broom, and head bowed, hustled out. That story is called, well. The next story is called An Old Wolf Talks to Us. There once was a wolf who had always been the smartest and meanest in the pack. For example, he won the Lone Wolf Award for killing the most sheep solo, no wolf pack, 23 sheep. But while attempting his greatest feat, trying, in the November of his years, to down a cow solo, the farmer shot the wolf, rendering him a paraplegic. The wolf speaks to us now from his den. I feel pretty good about how I've lived my life. I lived up to my lupine potential. Sure, occasionally I felt a little sad for the sweet sheep. I recognize they're nicer animals than I am, but I can't be what I'm not. My genes made me be an apex predator. Of course, I also am prey. Bears love us, tigers order us for their main course, and then there are the humans. I can't really blame people. After all, our main course is their livestock, their livelihood, and so it goes. Now I wait out my days, wolfing down easy prey, old or sick mice, rats, rabbits, and my favorite, deer. And I spend a lot of time thinking. My favorite thought is that I'm not that far removed from a dog. A dog's life, stretched out, snuggling warm, and completely safe in a human's bed, and then only when the owner feels like it or when the dog feels like it, the dog gets up, doesn't have to fight for food, but just looks longingly at his person who unfailingly responds by filling his bowl. Yeah, dogs actually have a bowl for their food, with nuggets perfectly tailored to their dietary needs and wants. I also wonder if there's wolf heaven, with the pearly gates not manned, but of course, wolfed. Would I get into heaven? Maybe killing so many sheep make me a bad wolfie, and then it would be down to wolf hell, where I'd never get to eat anything better than old sick mice. But mainly I just feel sorry for myself. I can't believe I lost out to a truly inferior wolf with a 3 Little Pigs gig. I could have blown that damn house down, and I would have been famous. Not just a big bad wolf, the biggest, baddest wolf. But here I sit in my cave, just another woulda, coulda, shoulda. What would I come back as? I think I'd want to come back as a gentle human being. I'd adopt a dog from a shelter and be nice to it and everyone else. Oh, that's just a silly fairy tale. I think I'll just try to find me an old deer. Anyway, that's called An Old Wolf Talks to Us. The next story is called The Hillcrest Widow Club. The 4 women of the Hillcrest Widow Club met every Thursday morning at 9 in the corner of a quiet coffee shop. Their statements about their deceased husbands started politely. For example, Mary said, "Yes, it's difficult, but I'm trying to muddle through." But slowly their fear of being seen as cold faded. But what really opened things up was when Zoe said, "Honestly, I'm relieved to be rid of that ball and chain." Brittany then felt free to pile on. "Don't we like talking more with each other than with men? We care more about family, feelings, okay, fashion. Successful men mainly want to talk about their work. The unsuccessful want about sports." Further emboldened, Zoe said, "And they just care about getting in and out, assuming they can get it up, which for the last decade my husband at least couldn't. And I had to pretend it was okay." 2 of the other women nodded. That encouraged Zoe to admit that she had fantasies about lesbian sex. Okay, more than fantasies. Before long, they decided they needed more privacy. So the Hillcrest Women's Club met in Zoe's plush living room. Mary asked, "How could you afford this?" Zoe replied, "My husband was a lawyer who had one client, but a great one, the Environmental Protection Agency." After a glass of wine and or a bong hit, Zoe moved close to Willow, the member of the club who seemed most likely to be willing to kiss. Zoe looked her in the eye, and when Willow didn't avert, Zoe kissed her as the others watched wide-eyed. Would Willow pull back? On the contrary, she sighed in pleasure. But Zoe sensed it was too fast, not just for Willow, but for the others. So Zoe pulled back and asked if someone would like another hit or a glass of wine. But 3 Zoe meetings later, they all, and I mean all, had a very cuddly experience. But after, Mary whispered something that shocked the others. "I love our Hillcrest Widows Club, but every so often I wonder, are men so bad that we're fine with bashing them? We wouldn't criticize women, let alone BIPOCs. If I did, I'd get the 3 C's. Censure, or cancel. Atop that, in so many news shows, and especially movies, TV shows, novels, some spunky smart woman triumphs over an evil or clueless guy. And when women have a deficit, say we're so-called underrepresented in science, there's massive redress and, yes, reverse discrimination. I know a number of women who got jobs over more competent, harder-working guys. Okay, so did I. Yet when men have the ultimate deficit, they live 5 years shorter than women, their last decade in worse health, and there are 4.4 widows for every widower, all we see is another run for breast cancer. Over the next few meetings, the others began to shun Mary. It was subtle, a little less eye contact, a little more interrupting, and unlike before, no one asked her to get together between meetings. Sad at being ostracized, Mary figured, well, it's not that big a deal to play the game. She even told anti-male jokes. What do you call a man with a half a brain? Gifted. What's the difference between government bonds and men? Bonds mature. What's the difference between a man and a catfish? One is a bottom-feeding scum-sucker, and the other is a fish. And soon, Mary was back in the fold. Excuse me. Anyway, that story is called Hillcrest Widows Club. Excuse me again. The next story is called Jimmy in the Year 2040. By 2040, the dystopians had been proven wrong. Jobs lost to automation have been replaced, not mainly by new jobs, but because of the 12,000-mile-per-hour nuclear-powered flying car. It can take off from any parking spot and go halfway around the world in an hour or less, so everyone can find a job with a reasonable commute, even if they live in the U.S. and the job is in China. Marriage, well, marriage, that practice that usually ends in divorce or in schlepping through life, has become unpopular, replaced by flexible pacts. Childbirth has become easy, and fetal death in childbirth virtually eliminated. How? Because nearly all moms choose to have their babies by curated embryo in vitro fertilization and to gestate their baby in an incubator. School, which had been notorious for producing too little learning and too much antipathy, has been replaced by super courses, the world's most transformational teachers giving interactive, individualized, gamified lessons online. Translated into 70 languages and available on smartphones, super courses enable every child, grade 4 through college, rich and poor, from Alabama to Zululand, to learn to previously unthinkable heights, enjoyably. Recreation is deeply immersive thanks to immersion rooms. Each home has one in which all 4 walls, the ceiling and the floor, are giant screens. Games in the immersion room allow a person or persons to, for example, have adventures while virtually being inside a human being, exploring the world or a world light years away. Gene editing and embryo selection have dramatically reduced cancers, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes. That has increased the average health span to 100, at which point most people, rather than decline painfully, take the La La Land pill. Gene editing has prevented depression. But Jimmy, while not depressed, usually feels empty. His job is to monitor a bank of artificial superintelligence computers to ensure they don't do anything nefarious. But while Jimmy could pull their plug, he wants to be able to do the less drastic thing, reduce the computer's capability. But Jimmy's coding skills are, despite prodigious efforts, marginal, so he suffers from the imposter syndrome. Also dispiriting to Jimmy are the so-called equity amendments to the Constitution. The 37th Amendment, the Equal Pay Amendment, mandates that with few exceptions, everyone must be paid the same, no matter how much they exceed the minimum productivity requirement. While Tom knows that being more than minimally productive is core to the life well led, he can't make himself do more than the minimum. The 38th Amendment, the Fair Living Amendment, mandates that residences be no larger than 180 square feet per resident, so a family of 4 is limited to 720 square feet. As a result, many people who lived in larger homes or apartments were forced to sell it or rent to enough people to get down to the 180 square feet per person. The Fair Living Amendment also mandates that the racial and ethnic population in all census tracts be within 10% of proportionality to the local population. So homeowners are forced to pay members of underrepresented groups to move into their census tract. The 39th Amendment, the Racial Compensatory Amendment, requires reparations to African Americans, to Latinos because they were descendants of victims of the Mexican-American War, to Chinese Americans whose ancestors were in indentured servitude to build U.S. railroads, and to the descendants of Japanese Americans who in World War II were placed in internment camps. To fund the Racial Compensatory Amendment, all other people are required to give 10% of their income every year until that requirement is scheduled to sunset in 2045. The Vietnamese, the Koreans, and Jews claiming a long history of prejudice have filed a class action suit to be included in the Racial Compensatory Amendment. The 40th Amendment, the Fair Partnership Amendment, requires each partner in a romantic relationship to annually file a relationship return as part of their tax return, whether their partner did at least 40% of the domestic work. That's a struggle for Jimmy, not because he doesn't want to do his part, but because he consistently feels drained. After work, he just wants to trudge into the immersion room. Even there, he usually has too little energy to play active games. He just wants to be flown around the various worlds. Jimmy's first attempt to lift himself from his malaise was to use his phone's Sigmund app, an AI-driven virtual therapist that uses machine learning to become ever more effective with each client. Sigmund helped Jimmy, but not enough. So Jimmy tried Rise, the top-rated mood-elevating mist, which activates a set of brain neurons and dulls another. The improvements that Jimmy felt from Sigmund and Rise weren't enough to counter the ever more draining effects of his life, especially his imposter syndrome and the 4 equity amendments. One night, when Jimmy was too tired to even want to be flown around the immersion room and too scared to tell his wife about the depths of his sadness, he went to the bedroom and stared at the La La Land pill. Anyway, that story is called Jimmy in 2040. This story is called It's Not My Job to Make You Coffee. Martel, I'm swamped. Would you make me coffee? Trying not to sound angry, Martel said, Michael, you know it's not my job to make you coffee. I'm your administrative assistant. That means Word doc scheduling and screening your email. It doesn't make me your maid. Never mind. Michael tried to say it evenly, but it came out angry. He thought, "Marginal? You're marginal, Martel. I'd fire you, except it would be so difficult." It's understandable that Martel refused. After all, her mother was a maid, and proud that Martel had gotten Microsoft certified in Word, PowerPoint, and even Excel. Plus, the media had endlessly told Martel that BIPOCs are marginalized. In her mother's world, when you face injustice, you must stand up. Rise up. It's also understandable that Michael would have liked to fire Martel. Especially when HR and other bosses stress collaboration, it doesn't seem like much when he's busy to ask his admin to make him a cup of coffee. Indeed, Michael, despite his master's in computer science from Caltech, sometimes has to do busy work that a high school dropout could do. And Michael's views had roots deeper than colleges and media. His father was an engineer who believed in, unless you're sick, no excuses, just get it done. But Martel had had enough. This wasn't the first time Michael asked her to make coffee. Worse, when she made a mistake, he'd often sigh condescendingly. And although she hadn't had a pay increase in 18 months, he turned her down, indeed hinted that she might have to accept a pay cut. She documented all that and filed a grievance with her union, which in turn sent it to HR and to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, demanding a hearing. When Michael saw that complaint, he quit and became a self-employed app developer. He's working on a better approach to matching job seekers with employers. The next story is called Amanda's Plan. Amanda knew she had to kill him. He was the only one who knew that she had siphoned off money earmarked for the on-site child care center and hid that. Whoops. Yeah, I got to start again. Amanda knew she had to kill him. He was the only one who knew that she had siphoned off money earmarked for the on-site child care center and hid that by using a too-cheap cut-every-corner contractor, and so a kid died while the climbing wall collapsed. The floor-to-ceiling window overlooked a pier that jutted out into the ocean. It was the perfect backdrop for an inspiring speech and for murder. Kevin, the CEO, intoned like a revival preacher. "It is so exciting to see you here at our 2023 offsite. Our wonderful products are not our most important product. Our most important product? Our employees, you." Amanda, a marketing manager, thought, "What a crock." "Of course our product line is worthy of you. Just think about how well priced our bronze line is, how our silver line perfectly balances price and quality, and our platinum product, best in class." Amanda thought, yeah, with a lower repurchase rate than our competitors. As Kevin continued stoking the troops, Amanda's mind wandered to the pier. She thought, Kevin said he couldn't swim, so when he finishes, I'm going to ask him to watch the sunset with me from the pier. And I am so excited that I know we are having this offsite. I know it'll be awesome. He smiled too broadly and applauded the audience. The audience clapped just loud enough to stay out of trouble. After, employees lined up to praise Kevin. When the last suck-up left, Amanda adjusted her blouse so just a bit of cleavage showed, sashayed up and asked him, "Want to watch the sunset?" Kevin thought, she just filed a grievance against me. What's this about? His wiser self would have declined, but he was riding the high of his keynote and the praise, suppressing that both were BS. Plus there was the flirtation, so he agreed. As they reached the end of the pier, Amanda got cold feet, so she worked herself up by arguing with him. "I still can't believe you wouldn't come with me to the abortion." Kevin replied, "There was nothing I could have done to help." "That's not the point. Haven't you ever heard of the need for support? After all, you were the father. Guys are clueless." "Stop playing the gender card. Women's way isn't the only way. Support that accomplishes nothing is stupid." "Only a guy could say that. Besides, you're the CEO. There is a power imbalance and you took advantage of it." "You're not my direct report." "That doesn't negate the power imbalance. And you also show what a sexist you are when you apologized for not coming to the abortion and I said, well, put your money where your mouth is. Since you claim to care so much about your employees, create an on-site child care center. And you said that funding it would be unfair to the childless and to the shareholders. Fuck the shareholders." My position was reasonable and principled. I caved only when you threatened to go public with our affair. I think I'm going to tell the board and the media that you used a sleazy bargain basement unproven contractor and pocketed the difference. And I'm going to tell to the board and the media, including that you dared claim that you weren't the father. Oh, really? Well, Amanda, long ago I had a vasectomy, so I couldn't be the father. Want to see? I'll show that to the board and the media. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Of course, Amanda was aware that Kevin might not be the father. She had slept with 2 other guys at the time. But all that feigned resentment about the affair and abortion accomplished her goal, getting her worked up enough to gin up the courage to get rid of him and end her worries about him going public with her embezzlement and now her false paternity claim. He started to lower his pants to show his vasectomy, which gave her the chance to shove him into the deep, rough water. "No, Amanda, you know I can't swim. Please save me." It was one thing for Amanda to imagine Kevin drowning, another to see him gasping, dying. So she dove in, helped him to a stanchion, and they climbed up. They plodded back to the hotel with a lot to think about. At the closing session, Kevin and Amanda held hands as they strode to center stage. Both applauded the audience. Only a few audience members applauded tepidly. And Kevin enthused, "I have a special announcement. I have been so impressed with Amanda Frost that I am promoting her to vice president." Anyway, that story was called Amanda's Plan. The next story is called Venus and Iris. This was written for children, but I think it has as much or more value to adults. Deep in the bog, with the cicadas singing, there was a fly trap named Venus. He was just old enough to start noticing things, like that he had red traps. He thought they were ugly and wished they were green like the rest of him. He also noticed things outside himself. He looked to the left, just some fly traps and some brush. He looked to the right, just some fly traps and some peat. He looked ahead, just some fly traps and lots of bog. But then he looked behind, and there was an iris. It was beautiful. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. It's hard for fly traps to talk, especially young ones, but he summoned all his energy and croaked, "Hi?" Iris stared at Venus's traps, and even though they were small, those teeth. She got scared, and so looked away. Embarrassed and sad, he turned away too. Days passed, and every so often an insect would fall into Venus's trap, and as soon as it touched 2 of the trap's trigger hairs, the trap slammed shut. Well, a growing boy's got to eat. And the boy grew bigger. Every so often he would look at Iris, but the bigger he got, the scarier he looked, and the faster she turned away. So he did too. Then one day there was loud buzzing. Beetles! He looked at Iris. She was covered with beetles. They were eating her. Venus widened his traps and squeezed really hard so lots of the glistening, attractive dew sat on his traps. It worked. A beetle jumped off Iris and right onto his trap. Snap! Dinner is served. Even though fly traps find it very hard to speak, love makes almost anything possible. So he tried to speak, but alas, all that came out was digested beetle. He tried again. More digested beetle. He tried yet again, and finally words came out, "Please, help me save my Iris." But the other fly traps didn't move. "Please," he cried. Still the fly traps remained still. He screamed, "I love her more than life itself." And that moved the fly traps. Suddenly, most of them squeezed as hard as they could. Their traps opened as wide as they could, covered with that glistening, attractive dew. And like a magnet, the beetles jumped into the traps. Well, most of them. One beetle was still left on the now very wilted Iris. Now what? Venus couldn't eat the beetle himself. He had just eaten one and remembered what his mother had warned him. Eat more than one in a day and you'll die. But Venus looked at Iris, and he knew what he had to do. He squeezed harder than he ever had in his entire life, and then he squeezed more. And all his traps opened the widest they'd ever been, even wider than you do when the doctor tells you to say, "Ah." And all his traps were completely covered with that glistening, attractive dew. And just like that, the last beetle jumped from Iris and into his trap. Snap! Venus looked at Iris, and he was happy. And this time she did not look away. She leaned toward him, and Venus was happy. But then Venus felt sick, and he wondered, should I have eaten that beetle? and the boy's red traps turned green, a sickly green. If you were Venus, would you have eaten that beetle? Iris knew that if she used her body to shield Venus from the sun for a day, he would live, but she, who can live only in shade, would likely die. If you were Iris, what would you do? How much should we sacrifice for love? Does lookism affect how much we're willing to do for others? Are there different expectations for males versus females in this situation? Anyway, that story is called Venus and Iris. The next story is called Hire the Best. Infused with liquid courage, I pulled out the button I had been too scared to wear in public. It read, Hire the Best. I thought, I'm lonely. If I wear this button, it'll be a screen. Today, most people will hate it because it implies that I value merit over diversity. But the rare person might be friend material. So, except at work, I started wearing it everywhere. The usual response from passers-by was silence, looking away, or pursed lips with eyes steeled forward. But finally Lily, a Japanese-American woman, said, I like your button. I said, why? She replied, because ultimately, only merit net benefits humankind. I asked her out for coffee and she agreed. But I must admit that I also use the Hire the Best button as bait. I walk leisurely so oncomers have enough time to process what Hire the Best means. I kill any passerby who criticizes it, like the guy who yelled, That's elitist, man! Why do I kill them? I'm not crazy. I want to make a difference. You see, anyone who uses criteria other than merit in hiring make the world worse. It hurts the products and services we buy, the leaders we elect, the people who get into top colleges and medical schools, the researchers who could save our lives. I can't change the world, but I can rid the world of some of those termites that are eating away at humankind. I rotate where I walk, always on a busy commercial street, so there's foot traffic, but no homeowners who, if the cops ask, could remember, let alone describe me. The button hooks them onto my line. My relaxed walk and pleasant expression reels them in a bit. Then I use FBI techniques to get them closer. I momentarily raise my eyebrows, tilt my head, and smile. Those cues suggest that you're harmless, and indeed that you like the person. The FBI uses those techniques to try to coerce a confession from suspects, or to convince a foreign national to spy for the U.S. If those tactics get a person to stop, I'll start the conversation with a comment about the weather, or better, I'll praise something they're wearing, say their doggy is cute, or whatever. I'll continue the pleasantry for a minute or two, but lest I seem too eager to befriend them, I'll then say that I need to leave. I feign uncomfortability and murmur, I'd be pleased to chat further, that is, if you'd like. I invite my mark to email or call me. Most don't, but enough do to make it worth my while. We agree to meet in a public place like a Starbucks. It takes time to get him to be comfortable enough with me to come on my boat. My cottage sits on an isolated cove, and I dock my boat there. For my disposal trips, to reassure the mark, I wear a Hawaiian shirt. I show caring by asking if they had trouble finding the place, showing empathy if they did, and praising them if they didn't. Once I get my mark on board, I offer a drink that's spiked with poison that disables the person in minutes. I had tried thallium and compound 1080, both of which are tasteless, odorless, and water-soluble, but both acted a bit too slowly, so I found something else. Lest you use it for a non-meritorious person, I won't tell you what it is. I take a route out to sea that avoids anyone seeing us. I go out far enough that the body will be impossible to find. When the victim is dead, I put on gloves to avoid any of their DNA staying on me, dump the body into the ocean, wipe down the boat to eliminate any other DNA fingerprints or fabric fibers, put each glove and my clothes in a bag, add a rock so it'll sink, and a half-mile from the body, toss it into the sea. I put my fingerprints back on the boat so it looks like I'm the only one who's been on board. I put on an identical set of clothes, return home, and take a shower to be sure there are no traces. No one ever finds out. One time a victim had told a friend about a guy she was planning to go boating with, and, along with other boat owners in the area, a detective interviewed me and CSI types checked out my boat. But of course, they never found a thing. I've now done it 14 times and will keep doing it until I die. It's the most pro-social way I can live my life. Of course, I've hidden all of this from Lily. In any case, that story is called Hire the Best. The next story is called Do You Take This? Paula and Justin met on Coffee Meets Bagels, attracted to each other by shared interests, both having middle-class jobs, and both liking to think things through, and most of all, finding each other attractive. After the requisite first checkout over coffee, there was the movie date, the dinner date, and the dinner plus dessert date. A few months later, they moved in together and soon after decided to marry. There was no drama, such as one person wanting to tie the knot, the other not sure. They were at the age when the peer and parental pressure, plus a desire to finally be grown-ups and have kids, all sprinkled with some pixie dust, made Paula and Justin's decision a no-brainer. Although neither Paula nor Justin were religious, they knew that at least some invitees would prefer a church wedding, while even the atheists would just shrug their shoulders. So, First Lutheran it was. After all, Pastor Christine had baptized Paula. So there were Paula and Justin at the moment of truth, the vows. The pastor didn't make the mistake of rushing through the vows. She wisely allowed plenty of time for the couple to let each of those time-honored phrases fully soak in. And indeed, both Paula and Justin, consistent with their liking to think things through, reflected on each phrase. Do you, Paula Whitney, take Justin Novak to have and hold from this day forward? The sex is still good, although not as good. For better or worse? Kathy and Tom seem so perfect, and now they're divorcing. For richer or poorer? What if Justin quits to work for a nonprofit? In sickness and in health? Mary left Charlie when his MS got bad. What would I do? To love and cherish till death do you part? Forever is an awfully long time. After just a wisp of hesitation, to consciously compensate for her doubts, she exclaimed, I do. And do you, Justin Novak, take Paula Whitney to have and to hold from this day forward? I have a roving eye. I haven't cheated yet, but for better or worse, Peter and Trish are exhausted by their kids. For richer or poorer? Trish told Peter she always wanted to work, but then, in sickness and in health, what if Paula gets cancer? What if I did? To love and to cherish till death do us part? Forever is an awfully long time. Having heard Paula's hesitation, Justin too quickly jumped in with an assertive, I do. I pronounce you man and wife. And everyone applauded. Anyway, that story is called Do You Take This? And I want to end with 3 short poems from my book, Poems Practical. The first one is called They Keep Shortening Our Chain. Long ago, the green machine shredded all freeway plans in favor of trolleys that circle empty. So, I'd like to shop there, but it's 10 miles away, a half hour each way. Oh well, I'll go. That job would be cool, but it's 10 miles away, an hour each way. Maybe I shouldn't. My friend's dying, but it's 10 miles away, 2 hours each way. Too long. Anyway, that story is called They Keep Shortening Our Chain. The next poem is called Censored. I studied long, hard, and the world shrugged. I worked long, hard, and the world shrugged. I said the un-PC, the unwoke, and the world censored, and censored, censored, and censored, censured, and censored, and canceled, till I disappeared. That story is called Censored. And the final poem is called Pat the Pro Paul. To the crowd white, for the wall we must fight. In the arena Latina, amnestia, amnestia. To the class uppers, you're taxed too high. To the class lower, soak the uppers. And in private, cut deals with fat cats, hep cats, and tiger media. So as always, male or female, Pat the Pro Paul wins. Anyway, those are short stories and 3 poems from my books, Modern Fables, Soloists, short stories of introverts and outsiders facing a dilemma, and Poems Practical. All are, as they say, available on Amazon. In any event, I do thank you for watching. As usual, I welcome your thumbs up and accept your thumbs down. I always look forward to your comments and especially like it if you hit the share button below. Share on your social media so that my efforts can have broader impact. And I am flattered if you choose to subscribe to my channel. In any event, I do thank you for watching. I am Marty Nemko.